welcome to the third day of the 20th DC Shorts International Film Festival. My name's Rebecca. I've lived in the Northern Virginia area for the last 4 years, and I am your moderator for tonight. This panel is called We Are Cinematographers, and I have 4 cinematographers with me to talk about their experiences and their craft. If you have any questions at any time, the lights aren't going off, so just raise your hand and you can ask them anytime to any person. So to start, why don't we have the person furthest at the end introduce themselves with their name, where they're located, where they're based, and how long they've been doing this.
Okay, Bradley Credit. I'm from DC originally, but currently based between New York and LA. I've been doing this for like 3 or 4 years.
Hi, my name is KUNITARO, and I'm a cinematographer based in the DC area, and I've been doing this professionally since 2009.
Hi, I'm Billy CAUSEY, based out of Columbia, Maryland. I've been technically doing this since I was 16 years old, so about 2006. Started with Betacam, then got some time in with film, and now we're rocking with digital. So this has been fun to see that tech evolution.
Betacam.
Yeah.
That's cool. Hi, I'm Stephen Lyons. I sort of jump between a couple different roles. A lot of cinematography, some directing, and occasionally doing some gaff and key work, but primarily cinematography. And I started this a long time ago. I don't want to say how long.
Okay, great. Well, the first question I have to kick things off is, when did you first decide that you could call yourself a cinematographer? Like, was it when you graduated from school, or did somebody call you that and you're like, oh yeah, I am? Or was it when you made your first video?
This morning.
Anyone else?
I'll throw an answer to that real quick, is that years back, so this is late 80s, that there were videographers, there were cinematographers, cinematographer, DP being somewhat interchangeable, director of photography, DOP if it's Europe. But if you look at it, the big question is director of photography. And the thing that used to be, years ago is the ASC, or Cinematographers Guild. It's the oldest guild in Hollywood, older than directors. So the standing thing used to be that they would send out a novice director, but you had to have a very experienced cinematographer to go out, mainly because there were so many technical concerns. So I was painfully scared to christen myself with a title past videographer, because it's like, these were the old people that were established, and they would challenge you on sort of like, have you earned the right yet? I think some of this changed a little bit, that the role, I think you've seen a lot of younger people get into it, and a lot of people are just incredibly technically adept. So there's been a lot more acceleration through the ranks. So if you traditionally were a clapper loader, second assistant, first assistant, camera operator, DP, you had to work your way up through the ranks. But with more opportunity and, again, too, faster learning, I think people have gravitated to that role a lot quicker.
I see, thank you. Does anyone else want to answer when they first began calling themselves a cinematographer?
I mean, the first time I got a paycheck with, and it says a director of photography, and I'm like, oh, okay, I can officially call myself that. I mean, you kind of have to label yourself as a cinematographer, director of photography at the beginning, regardless of whether or not you get paid or not. But internally, and how I felt, and I wasn't going through an imposter syndrome. I felt like I've kind of can call myself that as soon as I started actually getting paid for it and started making my own way, and being able to survive off of it. So
Yeah. Same. Just kind of when it got to the point of being able to make a living off of it, and just walking onto set and having a number of crew who were kind of looking to me, and then I'm just there with the director, just trying to help service them as much as possible. I think that kind of is when it started to resonate. I'm like, all right, cool, yeah, I can say that this is me and what I do.
Julie, do you have an answer?
Sorry, that was me just choking, but I'm fine. No, I mean, I can insert some thoughts. So I find the distinction between cinematographer and videographer to be very interesting because as I have gotten more into this, it's become more of a distinction, almost like a someone who takes the craft side seriously versus someone who takes the work itself seriously. You know, videographers, you usually think they take jobs that you show up, you use minimal crew, minimal equipment, you take the job itself seriously, and then you get in and get out, where cinematographers are always going to take their time and craft the image. But when I first started doing videography professionally when I was a teenager, doing weddings and then getting into commercials, the distinction was more technological. It was more if you shot video, you were a videographer. If you shot film, you were a cinematographer. So it's fascinating to see that change.
I see. By show of
spot
hands,
on there. Yeah.
in the audience, is anyone like doing cinematography work now? Or is everyone just curious, just related to somebody here, and that's why you're here? Okay. Okay, nice. All right. Yes. Yes.
I'm curious how the cinematographers on the panel like to work with new directors and approach a new project.
So how do you guys
That's a good one.
approach a new project and work with new directors?
I mean, I think it's pretty simple, right? I mean, you just kind of meet up with him or her or they and just get to know that person, what their likes are, whether or not they vibe and you vibe together and, you have the same sort of like passions or interests. And if not, if they have some sort of, what you call like inspirations that, you can connect with, then I think that's some sort of like, any sort of like connection, whether it be aesthetics or personality or just philosophy, I think is very, it's good. But like for the most part, yeah, you just get to know a person. And sometimes you don't get a whole lot of time either. And sometimes you get just kind of like a clash together, but yeah.
Yeah, I think like I kind of always very used to put like a formula to it or try to like think more, I guess, critically about like how I wanted to go about collaborating and meeting new directors. But I've gotten it to a point now where I just want it to be so focused on like how they want to tell a story and just communicating in that basis of like what's the script about. If we're talking specifically about like a project that they've reached out to me for. But it's like, for me, it's just a lot of asking about like what their inspirations are, like what films it is that they like watching, what photographers they've like always admired, painters that they've always admired, and kind of like keeping it like in that basis, but then also just getting to know them, like Kuni was saying, like as a person, and just is like this a person who I want to spend weeks, months in prep with, 12 hours, like maybe, hopefully 12 hours on
12,
set with.
12 to 16.
Yeah, 12 to 6. Like, is this a person I want to spend like an entire day with and go through all the stresses that filmmaking brings about? And just like, is this a person I can trust to do that with? And that they'll also kind of just like trust me to the same extent to try things and suggest things. Like, where we're going to have kind of a collaborative and open, just working relationship.
I don't quite have the same deep answer that they do. My experiences have been mostly related to working with around 5 directors my entire career so far. But we, in each case, have become very close friends. So it's an interesting thing. The first meeting with each one of them has been a bit like oil and water every time. But each time when we finish the project, we usually walk away best friends. So it's my personal experience, but it's probably not common.
I would add to it that it depends on the type of project too. Like if you're on a documentary, you might be finding the idea. So there's a little bit of exploration. If it's a commercial, it might be elaborately boarded. You're coming in specifically to do this. The agency spent a lot of time to work out exactly what they want. And then, I think a lot of it is the relationship. And again, too, is it very professional? It's very nuts and bolts, or is it kind of exploratory? And I used to work with a director all the time that would always, everything was a 60-foot dolly move. And I'm like, okay, well, if you look at how fast we have to move to accomplish 60 feet, there's your commercial in one shot. So we inevitably always ended up in post where it was like the middle 12 feet. And it's like, why are we doing this? Part of it was his process. I think he just had to work it out in his mind to say, let's block it, act it. You know what? So you always overdid to rein it back in. To me, it was a little excessive, but having said it, if this was his process, it was the right thing to do, and I just needed to do it. So I think a lot of it is that, you're always beholden to who's above you in the food chain. And even directors, they have their producers that they need to be accountable for. If you're a cinematographer, you're running crews, so you are management of 3 departments. But at the end, you're making things happy because however that person wants to work, I do feel like you have to mold yourself to that person.
Oh, actually, I do have a cool anecdote. I was doing a filmmaking fellowship just before COVID, so 2019. And I was, I was meeting with a whole bunch of different people. And one of the people I met was a director, and she was, she's awesome, but we never really talked to each other. And I would say we weren't technically friendly. We were just kind of like, hey, I saw you on one end of the room. You saw me on the end of the room. So, we just kind of went our separate ways. But then cut to a few months ago, I was just kind of, in between projects, and she called me up and asked me to work on a Hulu documentary. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. So sometimes I don't even know how the connections are made. I mean, it could just be a 5-minute conversation, or it could even be just a passing hello. But I'm not exactly sure, but those things magically happen where connections are made, and regardless of whether or not you're connecting with somebody for 5-6 hours long, or even 20 seconds, a relationship can form between a director and a DP pretty easily.
Kind of similar to that. I had two experiences in particular where one was a director who I reached out to in the middle of COVID. We just did a Zoom call and kind of didn't really speak beyond that. And then he came back towards the end of 2021 and was like, hey, I have this script that I would love for you to shoot. We ended up shooting it spring of last year, and it was a pretty big kind of just thing for my career at that time. And then fast forward a few months later, I was just at a friend's birthday party, and this friend does not work in film, but one of his friends who's there is a director, and we were just chatting about just life in film and stuff, and then that turns into 2-week commercial for Comcast. So it's just kind of things can happen in a variety of different ways, and I think it kind of just all comes back to the point of it depends on just who the person is and how you two connect just as people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have kind of like-minded ideas, I think then you might be able to just work well together and just kind of naturally occurs.
Yeah, or you might not even know that you made a connection until
Yeah.
years later, and you're
Right.
oh, okay, we liked each other?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, question.
I want to ask about how you all deal with being heads of departments as DPs. What is your process, either on set or before set? What is your relationship with your camera systems, your G&E crew? Can you talk about being heads of departments?
The question was being heads of departments for the live recording.
I mean, that's a huge nut to crack. It's we can get into the nuts and bolts of it, but it's pretty dense, I think. I mean, do you want to start?
I'll throw one thing out. A lot of work happens or should happen before you ever show up at set. So you've got budgets and you've got schedules. And, that's the thing I think. If you only read a magazine or see an interview, you think the cinematographer just sort of works this, magic with lights and stuff like that. But the question is, what lights, how did you spend your budget? At some point the producer's going to go, you've got this much for a camera package. That doesn't cover it. It's going to have to come out of something else. So if you get the best lighting grip package in town with all the pluses, did you shortchange somewhere else? So budgets and schedules run it, because after all, it is a business. And then, then you get into the gear that it's hey, do you want to try anamorphics on this? It's going to be a little bit more expensive. Maybe we have to light it differently or do something. If they're in favor, fantastic, but that's designed into it. So I think, ideally you're talking with key crew members before you ever show up to get them on page. If you have a pre-existing relationship, it comes up quicker. But again, too, at the end of the day, there's a huge amount of planning that needs to happen before anything is executed well, or the consequences is you go into overtime and then you probably don't work with that person again.
Are you talking about in terms of relationships? Are you talking about like personal, like person to person kind of, or are you talking about in a very nuts and bolts kind of departmental, organizational, logistics kind of way?
I think organizational, but if you want to talk about interpersonal relationships.
I mean, I think it's, I would also say like, you know, having your department heads kind of be friends is a double-edged sword because they'll bat for you, they'll push for you, and they'll go out of their way to like really make sure that whatever it is that you're doing is like right on the dot. But at the same time, it's like, you know, when you have friends and they're technically your employees to a certain degree, it can kind of get a little sticky sometimes. I mean, I've definitely gotten through that a couple of times this past year and a half, where like I had friends who are, you know, department heads, and I had to kind of like talk to them about certain things, and, you know, and I think, you know, if I had a strictly more professional relationship with them, it would have gone a little more swimmingly. But the fact that I was friends with them, you know, it kind of made it a little bit more complicated. So, yeah, that's anecdotally.
I think something else I do a lot as well is trying to view like the crew that I'm working with, whether that's like anybody in G&E, if that's a swing or camera PA, but also just kind of viewing everybody on a level playing field too, and just taking in different perspectives and like ideas and just having an open collaboration with them, because sometimes like I might have spent a lot of time in prep with the director or producer, just kind of like thinking through how we're going to tackle something on set, and then we get to the day and my focus puller mentions like and suggests an idea that actually works even better. So it's just kind of like trusting your crew as well, just as much as you kind of like also lead, but just being open to hear what they have to suggest. So like, for example, for me, kind of when I was starting out, like I came up through G&E, and so I'm pretty well versed in the lighting equipment that's available, but I'll still be on set and talking to my gaffer about like just the overall feel that I'm going for more so than just like specific units, because I might try to suggest certain specific units that I know would give me this look and this aesthetic or certain mood or softness or whatever. And then he might suggest a different light that he has in the truck that he can set up in half the time in a much easier, safer manner, so we can just kind of continue moving on with our day. So it's prepping things out like well in advance, so you have a very strong idea of what it is that you want to do, but then also being receptive to crew's suggestions as well.
Do you mind if I interject? Yeah. I would say my perspective on this is the secret to all of my cinematography is having a gaffer that I trust and can work with as an equal partner. I don't think I could do this on my own without having somebody that I feel is equally as knowledgeable and equally as skilled, if not more so. The few times I've worked on projects with a less than, say, desirable or a combative in some cases gaffer, it's always led to an inferior product. So I think that the relationship between the DOP as project lead as well as, you know, the individual teams underneath you is probably way more important than the relationship between the DOP and the director.
Oh, and then one last thing. Sorry. I guess the main thing is also like another good skill to have eventually down the line is like reading the room.
Yeah.
It could be a professional button-down set. It could be a little bit more, you know, loosey-goosey, but I think having just a good analysis of how the set is run will like really help you like survive through it or let you flourish through it.
So when you first began managing a crew, as a follow-up question, how did you know how to, like, which people to talk to or were under your direct control, or how did you know, like, how the hierarchy was more or less formed, and then distill, like, your creative vision to the appropriate people?
I think for me that came just through coming up through G&E, and even my days as a PA too, just getting the overall structure of how set was working and just seeing who was talking to who. Like I was reading call sheets the night that I got them, trying to like memorize everybody's names, or at least like the important people's names, and just sort of being on set and watching who's speaking to who and just how the decisions kind of come down the chain. And for me, that sort of taught me before I was even a DP.
You can read about it, you can, go to school for it, but yeah, ultimately just being on set and communicating and interacting with the people, you kind of get an idea of like how it runs and how it operates. I mean, Steven, you've been through all up and down the ladder, right? So you know
For better,
how-
for worse.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that like being on set, being there, being present, interacting with the people, that means so much. And I think, anybody who's wanting to be a filmmaker or, be a crew member, I would highly recommend, PAing or, anything. I think it's very helpful.
I think too, and this is something that I think all of us have done and all of us will do, is that sometimes if you want to learn more and increase your tool bag, do little indie experimental projects. And years ago, I bought an Aton camera. So here I had this beautiful 16 millimeter camera, and it's like, what am I going to shoot with it? And connected with a couple young filmmakers, and I told this one filmmaker, it's like, I'm going to work on your project for free. You've got to buy film, pay for processing, developing, but I wanted to do this one particular trick, which is push processing. So you basically underexpose the film and you basically overprocess it. So my 200 speed film would be 400. It becomes kind of magical. It opens up the blacks and the film looks amazing. And I said, okay, I'm going to push this one more time. I'm not going to do an uncalculated test on somebody else's money, but I had a Polaroid camera that I used to use for exposure. So a lot of math involved, but it's like a 3000 ASA high-speed film. I would take out light meters, read it like 10 different times, shoot my Polaroid, and I'm like, now I'm going to put my meter around and shoot the rest of the day without it. So a little ballsy. It made me sweat. And every night I went home and I sweated and sweated, freaked out, woke up at 3 in the morning. I'm like, I've underexposed the film. I've killed this project. Get the film back. It's perfect. I think the good thing here is it allowed me to push through a fear factor. And to me, it was kind of liberating. It's like, you know what, actually, this is giving me confidence to kind of move forward that I do know what I'm doing. And at that point, this was a critical thing. And I think that's one thing, too, is that music videos, stuff like this, I would never risk a big commercial because that's a product that has a specific business venture behind it. But if you find the right filmmakers that are like, hey, I want to do this crazy technique on a music video, the parameters of acceptability are here and there. And that's how you I think you expand your tool set, is you get to do things that you would never do normally. But again, too, it's all a calculated risk. So if you're a director, look for those projects and also look for a DP that's willing to be playful, because it doesn't matter how long you've been in this career, you're still looking for those opportunities to do things that you haven't done before.
Do you remember how much you spent out of your own pocket?
For the Aton or for the...
For the film and the
Well,
processing?
he paid film. So
Okay.
film was always like $120 for 11 minutes. Processing was 70, prep 30, and then transfer was $3.50 an hour if you could get a deal. But you could sort of beat them up, and that's the other thing too. You'd find a colorist, make a friend with them, and you'd go in late at night, and they would charge you a lower rate.
Yeah.
So, and that's one thing too. Labs, unfortunately they don't exist as much, but they were to sort of support the filmmaker, and that's one thing too. I do feel like people support visions. So I don't want to demonize any corporation, but if you're Amazon with $1 billion, what do they need to ask a favor for? But your buddy that's willing to do, an independent, like a music video or something, hopefully you can explore your tool set. And that's why you'll see a lot of these directors, they'll do crazy little commercials in the middle because they get to do things that they can't do at bigger budgets or shouldn't do at bigger budgets.
Yeah, actually, I did a project just like this past weekend. It was for a friend of mine. It was purely passion project, super low budget, paying out of pocket, but it was a situation where I was really relying on the relationship I have with the rental house, where it's this one company that I go to for pretty much everything in New York City Camera, if you're ever shooting up there. But yeah, it was like we go to them for so many of the commercial projects that I work on, so they'll give us a full 3 camera package and they make a lot of money off of it. But then it liberates me to go to them and be like, hey, I have this project that I'm doing for myself. This is how much we have. Can you help make this happen? And they supported it. So it's a lot of that too, of just finding those not just crew members, but also vendors as well, who are very supportive of your career. I know Panavision is also really good with that, with cinematographers. So I think that really goes a long way. Same thing with a colorist in terms of just like having somebody who is going to respect your image as much as energy as you pour into it, they're going to put it into coloring it as well. Because it all will just really elevate the piece. But yeah, just really finding those people who are supportive of your artistry and are willing to kind of like step in when you don't have a lot. And it's just kind of like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, sort of back and forth sometimes.
We had a question in the front.
Is that okay? Were we asking
Oh,
questions? in the
yes.
panel?
No,
Cool.
yes.
So I mean, I hope it's okay, technical question, but just like love to know your favorite lenses. I know, of course, the project and the picture is going to require different lenses, but if you guys have like sort of like your favorites, what your favorite lenses are.
I do.
I mean, go ahead.
I'm really like basic, but I really like the old school Zeiss standards, not the super speeds, but like the 2.1s. Those are fantastic. The way they kind of distort the image at like a 28 or 24, that's pretty sweet. I really like it.
I mean, I kind of just grew up thinking that everything should be done with anamorphics. So for me, I would say it's like the Cook anamorphic special flares I love, but also just like any Panavision anamorphic glass. So if anybody wants to do some C-series stuff,
Oh my
let me know,
God.
please.
You would, wouldn't you?
So I've got this radioactive Nikkor lens from the 1950s that you have to be careful with because it is still radioactive. It still has like decent radiation to it, so never put it up to your eye. But it's beautiful when it flares. And that's why I love it. It's the secret sauce. It's the wow factor of the flaring. Because the center lens is actually spiderweb cracked. And so as it flares, you get these little like streaks and stripes across it. And it's the most beautiful thing ever.
That's so cool. Wait, I'm sorry, can you tell me that again? What was the name of that?
It's just an old Nikkor lens. Yep.
I'll throw out one thing too is that, and this kind of started with film, is that years back you used to have tungsten film, basically in daylight. So that everything was based on that. Red, when the sensor was enveloped, it was a little bit more biased towards blue light. And the thing was, we've hit some sort of Rubicon that we've changed. You used to make images in the camera. So look at Blade Runner, more smoke, anamorphic flares. And now it's sort of like, okay, thank you for your work, cinematographer. Now we're going to take it into post and make it into something. I don't necessarily know that one is right and one is wrong. If you have a director that wants to play with it, well, you know what? It's his project or her project. They get to run with it. I think for me, I'll say the most exciting thing is if you can do it in camera, and that's where, like talking about those lenses. I think, so you're talking about the 2.1s that have like one less iris blade than I think the super speeds, and it shows up. And if you looked at like, I'm not sure what they did, but the show Ally McBeal like years ago, they had out of focus points that were profoundly different than anything else on television. Well, if you go back and research, years ago there was a thing called a Waterhouse stop. And you'd unscrew the lens and change the f-stop was basically like a washer. So the thing is, at some point somebody said, hey, suppose we made it in a triangle or a flare. So your out of focus characteristics pick up that geometric pattern. And that's like the thing that we went from cinematographers working to design perfect lenses as perfect as they could. Then at some point they became perfectly sterile. And it's like, not knocking it, these lenses are stunningly perfect. So if you're shooting green screen, you don't want flares and all kinds of weird characteristics. That is, everybody on post is going to seek you out and beat you up. But if you want a look, and again too, hopefully the directors sort of define what's acceptable, because what some people think is amazing flare, other people are freaking out on. So I think a lot of that's like, there really is no perfect, you might gravitate to a perfect lens, but it's also, what is that project? So I'm not sure. I kind of go across the path.
I think it is very project dependent, though. I think that's why that you'll kind of get that same answer from cinematographers. It's just the lens depends on whatever, because there's been situations where maybe I'd love to shoot a project with anamorphic lenses, like I can see it in that way, but then the director wants 4x3, and now you're thinking about lensing in a totally different way, or it's 4x3 and it's a period piece. So maybe we're shooting digitally, but we need to have something that feels vintage and feels classic. And I think kind of to your point as well, just like lenses getting so sterile with modern glass, a lot of that comes just with like digital cameras too, and just pushing back and trying to shoot stuff more with more older lenses. Like for me, if I'm not doing an anamorphic film, I'm probably trying to shoot with K35s, especially if I'm pairing that with like a mini or a mini LF, just because of its characteristics, and just has like this innate softness to it as well, where you don't have to workshop it as much with filters or anything in post. But yeah, it's just super dependent on whatever it is that you're doing, because sometimes it even comes down to what you can afford. So
Oh, and I think there's even a point where I worked a couple times where the director really pushed for a particular lens.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. It seems like really hard to just manage and take care of and just deal with. But, you know, I think one time I was working on like a PBS short, and the director was really set on using his set of old school Zeiss bayonet mount lenses. Like, and they're like this tiny. And even with the gear wheel, it's like this big. But like, yeah, I put that on. I had to get like a special order for the bayonet mount to like fit on the PL mount. It was insane. But like, yeah, but afterwards when I put that on, and I was like, that is amazing. That has a really unique, interesting look, and it was very hard to manage
Yeah.
and very hard to pull off of, but it was kind of worth it. So.
Were you pulling your own focus, or did you? Have
No.
somebody-
I had an AC, but it was just like super hard. I was like, it was like, it was like just literally everything is a static shot, but like to pull from one end of the room to the other end of the room, my AC was like, I don't know how this is
Yeah.
working. This is out of whack.
yeah, I had a commercial like a couple weeks ago, and the director was like, I want to shoot in Super Baltars. And I love them, but I did a test at one rental house, and they're not rehoused. And I'm just like, this was a travel job. It's in Ohio. And so I just, first thing I'm doing is calling the producer, like, please tell me that whatever lenses we're getting are rehoused, because if they're not, I'm not using them, because they're just going to be too much of a nightmare. So it's a bit of that, too. Like, when it comes to lensing, just testing, and not always just solely relying on testing on the project itself. But during slow periods, like kind of, that's all I've been doing while we've been dealing with strikes, is just going into the rental house and testing, because you can do it for free. And if they don't have it going out, if they have it in the shop, they'll let you try it out. But I think just getting familiar with not just the look that you get from it, but just how you work with it. How, like, you, even then, like from rental house to rental house, one thing you might deal with vintage glass is some of them might not be as well maintained as others. So I've worked with a set of K35s in Chicago that gave me a horrible time if they were wide open, but then the same set in New York is totally different. So just being familiar with kind of the quirks that you can deal with, but depending on what you're getting and where you're going to, I think testing is crucial, and it's a little bit overlooked, I think.
Yeah, I think that's kind of weird. It's like, I mean, I think it was back in the day, there was more time to test. There was more time between projects and concerning projects. Now I think you have to go out on your own to get that information for yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I guess, you can watch a bunch of Vimeo videos, but there's nothing like, sitting in a room, watching it through however big the monitor you are, and just seeing how those things react to your lighting,
Yeah.
your specifications. I think everything's very subjective, including lighting. And people tend to forget that even though if you watch tutorial videos, it's not exactly how you light or how you compose. So what you might see on the video, will be very different from when you're on the set and you're working with those exact lenses.
Yeah.
I think to add to that point too is if you watch YouTube, there's tons of people that will test, but the tests are sort of like, where are the pressures of the test coming from? It's usually somebody's spouse sitting there looking around a little bit, and it's like, yeah, but you know what, this lens looks fantastic. How much does it breathe when you pull focus? Like, you don't see that until you're sort of challenged with. And it's like, I've got kind of a favorite cheap lens is Sigma Art 50 to 100. So it's sort of like, I think a lot of people are like, that's garbage.
I've actually got one right
Okay, well, there you go. All right. And it is a fantastic, and as somebody once told me, they're like, it doesn't breathe, it gasp. And because when you pull focus, everything's getting bigger or smaller. So I'm a little hesitant to use it with fast motion stuff, but when it's sort of slow and moving, you can blend it in. So kind of like to your point, like what do you like? It sort of really does depend because, and again, too, some of the vintage stuff that hasn't been rebarreled, to his point, if you're only focusing 30, 40, 50 degrees, well, your camera assistant's going to literally hate you, never talk to you again. Then sometimes you get into 270 degrees and it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. I'm going out by myself doing a pickup shot and I've got to do this thing. So again, too, the lens that I would go out on a small crew might not be the same lens I go out with other shoots. And you kind of you're kind of getting paid to learn it. So I do feel like, too, for every hour you're on set, there's like 3 or 4 hours behind the scenes just playing with things and making sure your head's in your game before you show up.
Are we allowed to ask each other questions?
Yes.
So the topic of color was brought up earlier, and I kind of want to bring that up because one of the first paid things I did in the narrative space was actually acting as a colorist on student films back when I was in college. I'm curious people's opinions on different color pipelines because we currently have so many competing standards, and in many cases a lack of a standard. It's just somebody putting a LUT on or twisting some curves. Have any of you worked with ACES before?
No,
No? Okay.
not yet.
Familiar, but haven't.
I think I worked on it once, but I don't really.
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
mean, it's not like it. I mean, like if you're talking about the subject of, I mean, that's another rabbit hole.
It is a rabbit hole.
Oh man. I mean, like, are you talking about in terms of like?
Just the fact that it tends to be WYSI, where, what you see in camera more often than not is still the result in the color suite.
It depends.
Okay.
I think for narrative stuff, yes. Like I'm pretty clued into what's going on in color, but oftentimes with commercials, I might not have like just the way the timeline works out, or they're like, oh, we're coloring this internally or something. So I've gotten to a point now where I go in with my shooting LUT and just light everything to that, and as soon as the job is done, I pass that LUT off to the producers to share with the colorists, because at the bare minimum, like if they just put that LUT on the footage, then I'm relatively covered. Obviously, there's still probably things that I'd be dealing with on set where I'm like, oh, I'd like to open up the shadows here a little bit more or something. But if I don't have that level of input in the grade, I'm just going to try to be like, yo, here's the LUT. As long as you use this, we're fine. We're good enough, at least.
I think it's always been complicated. Sometimes some situations where I suggest a color pipeline and they are totally cool with it. There are other situations, especially with bigger budget kind of stuff, where it becomes like a giant kind of too many cooks in the kitchen, giant bureaucracy kind of situations where everybody has an opinion and it just becomes this like, I don't know, it becomes a kerfuffle, I think.
You go to company 3 and you don't have any money, and then you can't actually talk to the colorist.
Yeah. I mean, like, I just worked on a project and the mill was coloring it, and it was great, but it was still, like, it was a big project. There was a lot of hands, and a lot of people had opinions, and luckily everything was sorted out, but it was still, a lot harder than, calling up your favorite colorist, and he's your buddy, and you kind of get everything sorted out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm always like silently just terrified whenever I have to work with like a new colorist who maybe is like a suggestion of the director, because it could be great, but it could also be horrible. And so hopefully it's not horrible. But it's just like that kind of the jitters of working with a new person. But then also you're entrusting your image so much to them because you spent a lot of your time just like crafting it, and if somebody's like gonna push the blacks a little bit too much and now they look horrible, then I'm gonna be like pissed. But
I mean, I'd argue that the more we get into log and raw shooting across the board, which I know like in narrative it's the standard, but across commercial and documentary it's still getting adopted, the more we get into like a lab type situation where you're almost having to treat the colorist like you used to treat a lab in the film days. They have as much control over the image as you do. They have so many ways that they could mess up your picture, and so that there needs to be that communication and trust.
yeah, which I mean that's why like for most commercials I'm asking to get clued into the grade, or at least just be able to be on the session. But I think with commercials in particular it's really tricky just because the timeline is so quick oftentimes, and so maybe I'm already on another job, or it's just kind of it's already done essentially.
Yeah.
Whereas with narrative stuff, I'm definitely that's a whole thing. Like I have a treatment for the actual shoot and then a treatment for color as well, and have probably also done some references myself.
Okay. Let me throw one thing out to him, because you actually made a great comment about just going back to a lab. I could make the argument they have a lot more control than labs ever had, because
That's
at least
fair.
the lab, you could tell them to print up or down.
Yeah.
At least there was a target. I don't know that there's a target. You could literally shoot something day for night, and they could change it to look the exact opposite.
A lot of that is due to the technology, but a lot of that too is due to the lack of a proper standard. You know, the only standard we have is the display standard of Rec 709, but how we get there's like 1,000,001 different ways. There are so many ways you could do it by hand. You could do it using like mathematical transforms. You could do it just like, throwing any kind of LUT on it. But the thing that I like about the flexibility of where we're at right now, and the fact that it does tend to mimic in most like proper color management cases, is the fact that we're no longer twisting and turning lift, gamma, gain willy-nilly. We're back to just messing with density like you would with film, in ASIS and in like a couple of Da Vinci's color management pipelines that are built in. Like literally one stop from 25 up is one stop from 25 like on a Hazeltine. So it's perfect.
Well, see, that's where too, I think. I mean, I bought a red mainly to make sure I always had a default camera.
Okay.
And it's like, I'll shoot red. So, not saying, say what now? Boo? Well, it depends. What do you like?
Well, okay, so I really have a question about this.
Yeah.
Thing, because like you guys are like my live Google right now, and I can Google this, and I've been wanting to know. So I shot just on the RE with Orion anamorphic lenses, which I don't think I like those that very much. But the thing about what I'm really wondering about what you're asking is like, so all before that I shot on the C100, which actually is like a very underrated camera, and it's and I'm a director, but I'm also a cinematographer. So this is my first time using DP on my latest short. I've always been the cinematographer on my short on a feature as well. But with the C100, with this unique sensor, it has like this really unique, beautiful color palette. Even though I was shooting in log, it still has like its own native color. Whereas the RE, I feel like the way it was like totally flat, but it's pulling in a certain way that I'm like, I don't really like the color, and I don't feel like we have complete pull, even though it's totally flat. So I'm wondering, is there native color in the camera?
So there is to an extent. Most 10-bit log profiles will have their own sensor characteristics. With R8 specific to them, because they're literally using a CYMK-based transform on the ADC, going from the analog signal on the detector into your digital output, where most other digital cameras, it's going to be RGB positive, additive color the whole way through. I'm trying to think of a way to like make this where more people can understand it.
I was told at the beginning of this panel to try and not make it too academic. And a little bit
There
more
is a
accessible
difference,
to the average person.
but I would argue that whenever you're still dealing with the log, as long as it's a high enough bit rate and a good file with a healthy like exposure to it, it's almost like working with status M negatives. You have so much dynamic range to push and pull however you want. A lot of the look that you're getting from the Canon and the C100 is the way that they're doing their roll-off curve on the top and the bottom. It's literally just, you take your curves in your post suite and it's a straight line. That's your linear signal. You're literally just making an S shape, and that's going to mimic kind of the way that film density would roll off on the top and bottom, just with a smaller top end, because it's 5 stops in 709 instead of however many is in your print.
I have an addendum that's not academic. I think also, I think we were talking about having a good relationship with a colorist, a good post house. I think that's key as well. I think they are able to turn any camera into another camera pretty easily. And I think if you can find that relationship and find that connection, they're worth the weight in their gold. But again, you just have to really make sure to find that individual or individuals.
I would throw out one more thing too. So you don't like red, and you don't have to, but it's raw 16-bit. Were you shooting raw in ARRI, or were you shooting?
We were shooting 4K.
Okay.
No, that's a resolution, but color
we were
space.
shooting, color. We were shooting flat, raw.
But were you doing RAW or just like log ProRes or DNX?
Yeah.
Since I had a cinematographer on this one, I think he was shooting in raw as far as the
Okay, because ARRI RAW is like the worst RAW format because it's just literally censored data.
It is already raw. Yeah.
But see, I'd say this too, and like I'll put it
I'm
this
sorry,
way.
I have to interject.
Just
We have
real-
another question.
But just
after
real
this.
quick, so because this applies to everything. If you know what you're doing, you'll get good results with anything. And I have a feeling if he came up in Betacam, he worked with a lot more constraints than now, where you actually had to really be a half stop on. Now with red, I hate to say it, I can throw a dart at it, it's gonna be fine. And Ridley Scott he christened the camera himself, so I guess my point being is I don't think they're good and bad cameras. I think it's just how you adapt and work with them.
I would also argue with red, it depends on what generation, because some of the other ones were a bit
too.
decent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a red one for a while,
Yeah,
so yeah.
Now we're a little clunky, and I don't like it as much.
So the gentleman in the middle, please.
Yeah, so I had a question in terms of, from your experience of working with many directors, if you were giving advice to directors, what are your do's and don'ts for directors when working with DPs?
Do you know the difference between a tilt and a pan? Kidding.
And will you take the pan lock off when you start moving the tripod around?
I would say like be open and generous if you can. I think that's very helpful, because I think a lot of times the crew are doing their damnedest to make sure the director is getting his or her their vision out, and it's not like we're coming in and barreling in to say otherwise, or we know better than you or something like that. No, we're just trying to make things more efficient as possible, and I think sometimes people take it the wrong way.
I would actually want to touch on that point too, because there's been several projects that I've been on over the years where it almost feels like the DOP and the director are always bickering and fighting because they're not sure who's actually in charge of the picture. So I think it's always important to, in your position, remember that it's the director's movie and respect that. Just because you know more than they do in some situations, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not the one who's in charge of the project. And I find that trying to get into politics on set always leads to disaster.
Yeah, I think as well to that point too, it's just like, I think it's very important just for a director to know what they want to kind of achieve roughly, or at least know what their intention is. You don't have to know all the intricate details of how you're going to achieve it, because that's what you're bringing on the crew for. But if you can at least just be open and explain kind of like, this is what I'm trying to achieve with this scene, then you have trusted people who can help fill in the gaps and help achieve it. But then to Kuni's point as well, just being able to do that respectfully and to understand, at least respect, like what you're asking of the crew. So like, yeah, you might want to get this sunrise shot on top of a hill, but you're not lugging like a 30-pound camera up at 4 a.m. So it's just like, that's like an example of just like being able to respect kind of what you're asking of your crew. But then also, yeah, to like just being able to have everybody be mindful of the fact that at the end of the day, it is your project, it is your story, and we're all there to help just to support that and to help achieve it. And we're going to give everything, but it's just being able to be open to suggestions or just collaboration in general, I think is very important.
And also to add to, what having directors be mindful of what they want. Yeah, it could just be as simple as like, do you want the scene to feel happy or sad or sorrowful or regretful? It doesn't have to have any technical terms behind it. It just has to have the emotionality and intention behind it, and then we'll be able to kind of bridge the gap a little bit on a visual sense.
Yeah, like when I'm prepping for a short film, I'm always just going like page by page and asking the director, what is it that you're trying to achieve with a scene? What is it that you're going to tell the actor that you want from them? Because that's going to give me a lot of insight in terms of how I want to light something or how the camera should or shouldn't move. So I think it digs in further into just being prepared and knowing what you want to achieve with the project, because that's going to follow you from prep to post as well. Like you're going to make the same decisions or similar decisions in the editing room as well about like how quickly something's going to cut away or what you're going to cut to next.
I thought one thing too, depending on the project, because we talked about it before, like commercials, you kind of know what you're going in, what the goal and expectation is. If it's a little bit more experimental and narrative, the more time you can buy the director to feel confident that something is moving along in the direction that they want, they can now spend more time with, the actor. And maybe, because that's, I said this in the last session, but at the end of the day, if you have the prettiest looking movie ever and the acting sucks, it's a failure. Right. Whereas, I'm not going to pick on David Lynch for, Eraserhead or anything, but try to watch it. It's got the right look for it. He's certainly happy. That movie works because it's what he wanted. So that, it kind of does get to that it's like, generally I find that like if I like the movie and the acting's great, I'm okay with cinematography regardless. And I've got friends that are like, "Did you see the boom mic 3 times?" It's like, no, I was actually watching the movie. Like, I don't want to be a technician when I'm watching a movie. I want to watch a movie. And I think that that's one of the things too, is the more time that they can work with the actors, because it seems like you have a lot of time, but it runs out pretty quickly. And if they don't trust you and they have to come over and say, is the dolly set? What speed are you going at? Why are you coming in at this height? And then the big question is reversals, matching. And it's like, if they know, like, okay, you've got an eye, I hired you for a reason. We're shooting this first. We're coming back on this person. I know they're going to match. I don't have to talk to you. They just bought themselves 10 minutes to go over and spend more fruitful conversation.
And I think that also speaks to another thing that's really important for directors is just really honoring the amount of time you spend in prep and not overlooking anything, just because you can have so many of those questions just ironed out before you even arrive to set. And so then I'm already going off to set up the scene, to set up lighting, camera positions, whatever, but then the director has that time to just sit with the actors and go over what they need from them performance-wise.
I think we had another question. Gentlemen. Yes.
What's up, Ricardo?
My question is, what movie got you inspired to get into cinema? And then the other part of it is, what would you recommend for starting cinematographer? What movie would you recommend you watch?
I mean, the second part of that question I have to think about, but the first one is Dark Knight.
That was P.T. Anderson's Magnolia.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty dated, but like I know what I'm about.
I probably have the lamest answer out of the bunch, but I got into cinematography because I loved watching Kamen Rider as a kid. Like, we got all these
Yeah.
bootleg VHS tapes in, and I'm like, I want to make that. I want to make something cool like that.
You should watch Shin Kamen Rider.
I still need to.
It's good,
I
it's
missed
good.
I missed the theater run.
It's good. It's good.
What was the second part of the question?
What inspired you? And then, what would you recommend for a cinematographer who's starting out? What movies to watch?
This is going to sound strange, but I would recommend looking at really well-made, low-budget shorts, like your peers and what they're doing, because they're going to be in the same budget level and the same resource level as you. So it's a good resource.
Are you already interested in pursuing cinematography?
I am.
Okay. I know this sounds like kind of backwards, but like I would also recommend just reading a ton of like American Cinematographer magazine.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a lot of technical terms and a lot of gobbledygook that you may go over your head, but they have like really cool, like informative information on like what lights they use, why they used it, what kind of like quality of light you get from those lights. And that's how I usually kind of got a lot of my tips back in the day. Just reading, just observing, just looking at like today, how the light's falling off on people. Like just observations in real life can really attribute and help out. Like I'm sure tonight when you go out in the theater, there's going to be tons of crazy lighting everywhere because of the bars and whatever, and just see how the shadow casts on people, what kind of light and how it reacts to skin tones. I think those things are incredibly helpful.
Yeah, and I don't think there's like, I can't think of one particular movie that cinematographers should watch if they're aspiring. I think it should just be as much as you can. Especially if you're like, maybe if you have a project that you're working on, if you can think of certain movies that maybe fit within the feel, I would say you watch those, but I can't like pinpoint it to one particular film. I think you should just watch films from as many places and time periods as you can. So watch a silent film from Hollywood, watch something that was like French New Wave, watch British New Wave, Japanese films from like the 70s or Rashomon or something like that. So just kind of expand your palette and just watch as many different things as you can, because you'll be able to pull something from everything.
I couldn't agree more, because I do think if you think of cinematography as just like fashion, if you were going to fashion, design school, and it's like, what does a 1920 or 2023 dress look like? And you probably would have had some sort of history, and film is cultural history, it's anthropology. So the thing is, if you go back and look at Technicolor musicals, look at noir films, I mean, noir is amazing, because it's like back in a day when they were lighting with carbon arcs, and, you couldn't light a set up to 200-foot candles. I mean, everybody would be bathing in sweat. So they were real specific. So when you watch these movies, the camera moves are specific. I mean, incredibly well orchestrated. And I think sometimes, because I see this with my kids, like, Dad, it's an old movie, it's in black and white. And it's like, you had no idea. These are the most talented people walking the earth at that time. So when you see a Sunset Boulevard, it's like nobody on that set wasn't the best people working. And I think, you look at I wasn't growing up a big musical person, but the more I looked at Singing in the Rain or something like this, and it's like, wow, these movies, look at the color and the pop that they get out of something. And then, just to kind of throw to your point, it's quick stories. I got hired to work on a documentary about LBJ years back. So I was coming in to assist, rent my Aton. Said I don't really go out as camera assistant, but sounds like a cool project. I'll go out. And day one, the director goes, he's an English guy, and he goes, "Would you like to shoot some Super 8?" And I was like, "Dude, I would love to shoot Super 8. You're kidding me." And he gives me a box, and I expected it to have no weight. And I was like, "You're kidding me." I take it over to the corner, open it up. It's like 25 reels of Super 8. And I said,
Were they 400, 800?
"These are, no, the hundreds of
Hundreds?
Super 8.
Oh, yeah.
And he goes, or I guess they're 50-foot cartridges. And he goes, it was a little Nikon R10. And he goes like this, he goes, "Well, Steven, shoot the film." And I said, "Okay, how much can I shoot?" And he goes, "Well, all of it. We'll order more." And I was like, "Wait a minute, don't even say this. You're going to regret this. I will literally I'll be shooting everything." So the weird thing is, the cinematographer was this guy, Ray, ex-BBC guy. He tended to run the camera himself, and he just says, "I've got this covered, do something." And I was like, okay. So at one point he goes, "Why don't you stand in the doorway and block so you only have half an image?" And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. So everything we shot was wrong, because the idea was it was supposed to be like we were in the White House at a time of crisis. And, a news photographer was not going to put a camera at the president's face to get a perfect shot. So everything was deliberately, weirdly framed and wrong. And we got notes back, I think it was from Discovery, that they're like, "Perfect, you've just set a standard." So all of the sloppy shooting, hard direct news lighting, and like I say, I questioned it for the first couple days, but it was like, man, I'm stupid. I should have watched old newsreels from the 60s, and if I had, I would have got it. Ray obviously did his homework, I didn't. And it was a big wake-up moment that, again, too, it's like, for what we were doing, we weren't trying to make it look dramatic. We were trying to make moments of film news that didn't exist blend with existing footage. And I'm really proud of that. I think, the credit goes to Ray, the cinematographer, but it's neat when you can do something that's indistinguishable from a historic archive.
Oh, actually, I do have a good suggestion. You have, I'm sure you have like favorite movies, right? Yeah, so take those favorite movies, track down who shot them, and then like dissect how they did that.
And watch their other work too.
Yeah. That's what happened with me with Magnolia. I tracked down Robert Elswit's interview on American Cinematographer, and he was talking about specific scenes, and I tracked that down, and I tried to recreate it, and I figured out what stock he used, what lenses he used, what kind of lighting setups he used, and then I looked at his other work, and then just all the way down to when he was doing like River Wild with Meryl Streep and Kevin Bacon, like 92, 93, I think. Or like, he did some schlocky stuff, and like I tracked it all down. And if you're interested and if you're passionate about it, just go down a rabbit hole.
And I think even going like further than that too, like in a lot of those American cinematographer articles, they're going to reference what films they watched to inspire that approach, or whatever else. It might have been a photographer or a painting or something. It's also like going to those resources that they've listed. So, like for example, if you love Barbie, you can go back and watch all the other musicals that that inspired Barbie, and just doing that kind of repeatedly and just diving really deeply into the stuff that you already have watched and that you really enjoy is going to kind of open up a whole other lane of things that you might not have been able to had you just been like, all right, I need a formula of how I'm going to go in and approach this.
So before we wrap up, I'm going to do the raffle. Who wants to pull the raffle real quick? I'm going to give it to Kuni.
Why me? All right.
And then say the number you see.
All right. 398-7828.
Dude, no way. I got it again.
Oh.
All right, one more time.
It's the same thing. You want it twice?
One more time. One more time. Okay.
Cool with that?
Congrats.
Hey. Oh, the phone.
So So this wraps up our hour and our panel. Please give a round of applause to our panelists for giving all of their years of expertise.
Pick your brain about color.
Are all of you on social
Are we a
media?
little good lobotomy?
We are all on social media, or should be.
Da Vinci, and I was
All
looking at
right.
Bradley Credit
I don't know if
DP
they
on
let me
Instagram.
Kuni Oe at Instagram.
Da Vinci, about 27. I won't profess to be that great with color.
Bradley Credit DP on
All
Instagram.
in one, 'cause it's hard to know.
Billy, are you on Instagram as well? And Steve?
Yeah, it's, sorry, I missed what you were asking.
Oh, if you could just say your handles going down, people can find you.
Yes. Hold on one second. I gotta pull it out because it's my name, but it's like backward, and I forget how it's backward.
That was one of the things we had to like figure out in Instagram, like try to like,
Yeah.
we were being all clever at the beginning, and
So-
then now we're just like,
What's
just
your name?
boring name.
Yeah. So the name it's just CAUSEY Jr.B. If you see a picture of me doing like this, that's it.
How about you, Steve? How can people find you?
I am Stephen Lyons, Stephen. And if you just do Stephen Lyons Cinematography, I'll probably pop up. My company name is, it's kind of a play on words. It's Cinetique Images, spelled kinetic with a C. So kinetic images, and that'll take you to sort of a portfolio.
And Lions with a Y.
LYONS.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of your festival.
Good night, everybody.
Absolutely.
Thank you.